Humans' high-speaker Valerian's laughter echoed through the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, his crystalline form shimmering with each chuckle. You called an emergency session of the High Council to discuss humans. I stood my ground at the center of the circular chamber, my forearms clasped behind my back in a formal stance. As Supreme Commander Nexus of the Astari Empire, I'd seen enough wars to know when a species deserved attention. But trying to convince the Council of anything they didn't want to hear was like trying to teach a quantum drive to feel emotions. Yes, High Speaker, I responded, keeping my voice steady despite the ripple of amusement spreading through the assembled representatives. The humans have achieved faster than light travel and have established colonies beyond their solar system. War Minister Call, a massive being composed of living metal, leaned forward in his gravity-suspended chair. Commander Nexus, surely you jest. These creatures barely survived their atomic age. Half their planet remains convinced their world is flat. More laughter. I activated the holographic display with a flick of my lower right hand. 3 cycles ago, they had just reached their moon. Now they have settlements on Mars, Europa, and Titan. Their expansion rate is unprecedented. Unprecedented, Chancellor Rix of the Centauri Collective snorted, her bioluminescent patterns flashing in what my species recognized as contempt. The Astari must be getting desperate for threats if they're worried about hairless primates in metal cans. I switched the display to show human military formations. They've developed energy shielding that rivals our own, weapons systems that. Enough. High Speaker Valerian raised one crystalline appendage, silencing the chamber. Or Commander Nexus, while we appreciate your vigilance, the Council has more pressing matters. The humans are barely worth monitoring, let alone discussing. They will either destroy themselves or remain confined to their little corner of the galaxy. With all due respect, High Speaker, I pressed on, I've studied their history. Their capacity for warfare is primitive at best. War Minister Call interrupted. I reviewed the reports myself. They still use projectile weapons. Projectiles. Against energy shields. His metallic form vibrated with mirth. I switched off the holographic display, my 4 hearts heavy with foreboding. You're making a mistake. The humans are not like other species we've encountered. They think differently. They fight differently. Thank you, Commander. Valerian's tone made it clear the discussion was over. Your concerns have been noted. The Council will continue its standard observation protocols regarding emerging species. Nothing more. As I left the chamber, the laughter followed me. Let them laugh, I thought. I'd seen the footage from our stealth probes, humans fighting wars across their planet, adapting, surviving against impossible odds. The Council saw a primitive species fumbling with technology they barely understood. I saw a sleeping giant, and I feared what would happen when the Council inevitably woke it. Looking back now, I wish I'd tried harder to make them understand. But even I couldn't have predicted what one human soldier would teach us about the true cost of war. 1 galactic standard year later, I stood on the bridge of my command vessel, watching the diplomatic disaster unfold. The humans had sent their finest diplomatic vessel, the U.S. Olive Branch, to establish peaceful contact. How fitting that its destruction would mark the beginning of a war none of us were prepared for. They're broadcasting again. Supreme Commander, my communications officer, reported, her sensor stalks twitching with anxiety. Put it through, I ordered, already knowing what we'd hear. The human voice crackled through our speakers, calm despite everything. This is Captain Thomas Wright of the United Earth ship Olive Branch. We come in peace and seek diplomatic dialogue. Please respond. War Minister Call's response came swiftly through the Council's command channel. These humans dare to approach the Council's space without proper evolutionary certification. Fire the warning salvo. I watched in horror as energy beams lanced out from the Council's defense platforms. They weren't meant to destroy the human ship, just frighten them away, demonstrate our superiority. But the Council had gravely miscalculated. The Olive Branch's shields flared brilliant blue, absorbing the attack. Impossible. Our intelligence said their shield technology was decades behind ours. The human ship didn't retreat, it held position. Last warning. Captain Wright's voice remained steady. We represent humanity and peace, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. War Minister Call laughed over the channel. These primitives think they can threaten us? Destroy their vessel. Show them the consequence of their arrogance. I tried to intervene. "Minister, wait." The defense platforms opened fire with full power. The olive branch's shields held for 3 seconds longer than anyone expected before failing. The ship broke apart in a silent explosion, its crew of 253 diplomatic personnel lost to the void. That should have been the end of it. A tragic mistake, perhaps, but one that would teach humanity its place in the galaxy. 2 days later, we received word that the human colony of New Eden had been attacked. War Minister Call had decided to press the advantage and ensure human submission. I arrived with my fleet to find New Eden burning. The Council forces had bombarded the colony's main settlements from orbit, standard procedure for dealing with upstart species. But something was wrong. The colonial defense forces weren't running. They were fighting back with a ferocity that shocked our troops, and leading them was a soldier who would soon become legend. Major Isabella Santos first appeared on our sensors directing a counterattack against our ground forces. The Council troops had expected to find terrified civilians. Instead, they found Marines led by a tactical genius. "Sir," my tactical officer called out, "you need to see this." The display showed Santos's forces using the colony's underground maintenance tunnels to outflank our troops. They were using our own shock tactics against us, striking hard and vanishing before we could respond. Most disturbing of all, they were adapting to our technology at an impossible rate. I watched as Santos's soldiers deployed modified mining equipment that could disrupt our energy shields. They developed countermeasures in days that should have taken years. Supreme Commander, my second-in-command, whispered, "I don't understand. Why aren't they surrendering?" I remembered my words to the Council. They fight differently. Looking at the tactical display, watching Santos spring another devastating ambush, I realized I hadn't known how right I was. The Council had wanted to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, Major Isabella Santos was about to teach us one, and the tuition would be paid in blood. The Orion's Belt Defense Station was supposed to be an easy victory for the Council forces. Our fleet outnumbered the humans 10-1. Our technology was superior. Our tactics had been perfected over millennia of warfare. We were wrong. So catastrophically wrong. Supreme Commander War Minister Call's hologram flickered with static. "Why hasn't the station fallen yet?" I studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of the chaos unfolding before us. The humans are not following standard defensive protocols, Minister. That was an understatement. Major Santos had turned the entire asteroid belt into a death trap. The first wave of our ships had pushed through easily enough, breaking the outer defensive line. Victory seemed certain. Then the asteroid started moving. "Impossible maneuver from Mining Cluster 7, my tactical officer shouted. "They're using repurposed mining rigs too." The massive asteroid slammed into one of our heavy cruisers at relativistic speed. The ship's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, might as well have been paper against millions of tons of accelerated rock. "These tactics are barbaric," Call spat. "They're throwing rocks at us." Rocks. But they were throwing them with terrifying precision. Santos had turned the entire belt into a giant mass driver weapon. Whilst we'd focused on their military ships, they'd spent months positioning and fitting engines to thousands of asteroids. "New contact," the sensor officer's voice cracked. Multiple signatures emerging from the dust clouds. I watched in horror as swarms of small craft burst from hiding places throughout the belt. They were civilian mining ships, retrofitted with crude but effective weapons. They darted between our capital ships, too small for our main guns to target effectively. "Status report," I demanded. "We've lost 30% of our fleet," my second-in-command reported. They're using our own debris against us, sir. Every destroyed ship becomes cover for their fighters. They're herding us into killing zones with the asteroid fields." A new transmission cut across our command channel. Major Santos's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Supreme Commander Nexus, I believe it's time we discussed your fleet's surrender." The audacity. Our remaining ships could still reduce the station to atoms. But as I opened my mouth to say this, I noticed something odd about the tactical display. "Sir," my tactical officer's sensor stalks went rigid. Multiple nuclear detonations detected throughout the belt. They're creating debris fields to blind our sensors. Santos hadn't just prepared the battlefield, she'd turned the laws of physics themselves into weapons. The debris from the nuclear explosions formed an expanding cloud of charged particles, rendering our advanced sensors useless. We'd have to fight almost blind. "This is your final warning," Santos continued. "Withdraw your forces or be destroyed." War Minister Call's hologram blazed with fury. "You dare threaten the might of the Council? We will reduce your entire species to." The transmission cut off as a precisely aimed asteroid smashed through our command and control ship. I watched in stunned silence as the pride of the Council fleet broke apart, taking the War Minister with it. "Sir," my second-in-command approached cautiously. "The humans are launching a counterattack. They're using our own ship's wreckage as cover. The debris is interfering with our targeting systems, but somehow they're navigating through it perfectly." Of course they were. Humans had been dealing with space debris since their first orbital launches. While we'd focused on elegant energy weapons and perfect formations, they'd learned to turn everything around them into a potential weapon. Multiple impacts. They're forcing us into a crossfire between the station's guns and the mobile asteroids. I watched Santos spring her final trap. The remaining mining rigs fired their engines simultaneously, creating a ripple effect through the asteroid field. Thousands of rocks began moving in complex patterns, like some deadly orbital ballet. Our fleet, blind and already bloodied, had nowhere to go. We couldn't advance without being crushed between asteroids. We couldn't retreat without exposing ourselves to the station's guns. And all the while, those swarms of modified mining ships picked us apart with savage efficiency. "Your orders, Supreme Commander," my second-in-command asked quietly. I looked at the tactical display one last time. In 3 hours of combat, Major Santos had nullified every technological advantage we possessed. She'd turned an asteroid belt into the deadliest defensive system I'd ever encountered. And she'd done it all with mining equipment and improvised weapons. "Send the surrender signal," I ordered, "and send a message to the Council. Tell them we severely underestimated humanity's capacity for warfare." As I watched the white surrender beacons activate across my remaining ships, I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. The Council had dismissed humans as primitives throwing rocks in space. They'd been right about the rocks. They just hadn't understood what that meant until it was too late. The Council's response to our defeat at Orion's belt was predictably arrogant. They assembled the largest invasion fleet in galactic history, 10,000 ships strong. Their target? Earth itself. The Council believed that by striking at humanity's homeworld they would break their spirit. "Let them come," Major Santos's message echoed through every Council command channel. Not a threat, but an invitation. That should have been our first warning. High Speaker Valerian himself took command of the fleet. "These humans have had their moment of glory," he announced. "Now we will show them true power." I watched from my rehabilitation station as the massive fleet approached the Sol system. After my surrender at Orion's belt, I'd been stripped of my command but kept as an advisor. None of my warnings were heeded. The fleet encountered no resistance at the system's edge. No asteroids turned into weapons. No mining ships appeared from nowhere. The Council commanders grew confident. You see, Valerian's voice dripped with satisfaction. They know they're outmatched. They hide in fear. Then we detected the transmissions. Thousands of them, broadcasting on every frequency. Human entertainment programs, military documentaries, historical broadcasts, sports competitions, music. Some primitive attempt at electronic warfare. The fleet's technical officers dismissed it. But I noticed something troubling. Each ship in our fleet was receiving different broadcasts, carefully tailored to their species. For the Centauri, they showed humans fighting against overwhelming odds. For the crystalline Valerians, demonstrations of human engineering breaking supposedly unbreakable materials. For the silicon-based Nexus, footage of human-computer viruses evolving faster than any defense. They're studying us, I realized too late. Every broadcast, every transmission. They're learning how each species thinks, how we react. The fleet pressed on toward Earth. Still no resistance. But now the broadcasts changed. Every human transmission carried hidden messages, subtle psychological triggers designed for each species. The Centauri crews began seeing threats in every shadow. The Valerians started doubting their structural integrity. The silicon-based crews reported logic errors in their thinking. Major Santos had turned our own minds into her weapons. "Shut down all receivers," I shouted into the command channel. "They're not trying to jam our communications. There." The trap snapped shut. As our ships scrambled to lock down their communications, the real attack began. Not with weapons, but with code. Every transmission had carried hidden packets of data, fragments of viruses that assembled themselves in our systems. But ships began firing on each other, their targeting systems compromised. Navigation computers sent vessels on collision courses. Life support systems created panic scenarios that never existed. Status report Valerian demanded. 300 ships lost to friendly fire. The response came. 700 more reporting critical system failures. 2,000 detecting phantom enemy contacts. The rest were about to face humanity's real fleet. They emerged from hiding behind Earth's moon, a fraction of our number but moving with perfect coordination. All ships, battle formations, Valerian ordered. But there were no formations left. Santos had turned our own fleet into a chaotic mess, ships shooting at hallucinations while human vessels picked them apart with surgical precision. "Now you understand," Santos's voice cut through the chaos. "You thought technology alone made you superior. But war isn't about having the biggest guns. It's about knowing your enemy." I watched in awe as the human fleet demonstrated everything they'd learned. They knew exactly how each species would react under pressure. They knew our tactical doctrines, our psychological weaknesses, our technological blind spots. The mighty Council fleet collapsed in hours. Not through overwhelming force, but through understanding. Ships surrendered by the hundreds as their crews succumbed to carefully crafted psychological warfare. Others fled, their commanders broken by the realization that every defense, every tactic they'd relied on, had been analyzed and countered before the battle began. How Valerian's final transmission was barely a whisper. How did they know us so well? The answer was beautiful in its simplicity. While we dismissed human entertainment as primitive, their stories had prepared them for countless first-contact scenarios. While we'd laughed at their endless wars, they'd learned to understand and adapt to any enemy. While we'd mocked their broadcasting of information, they'd turned it into the perfect intelligence-gathering tool. Major Santos hadn't just defeated the Council's fleet. She'd turned our own arrogance, our own sense of superiority, into a weapon against us. The broadcasts hadn't been meant to confuse us, they'd been meant to prove they understood us better than we understood ourselves. As I watched the remnants of the Council fleet retreat in disgrace, I remembered my words in the Council chamber. They think differently. They fight differently. I just hadn't realized that understanding differences would be their greatest weapon of all. The emergency council session was nothing like the one where they'd first laughed at humanity. No one was laughing now. The great chamber, once filled with pride and arrogance, now echoed with fear. 3 months War Minister Call's replacement, a younger, more subdued metallic being, reported. "In 3 months they've pushed us back from every human colony. Our casualties." Speaker Valerian, his crystalline form dulled with stress, raised a hand. "We know the numbers. What we need are answers. How did we fail so completely?" I stood again in the center of the chamber, just as I had before. But this time, when I activated the holographic display, everyone paid attention. "This," I said, displaying footage from our worst defeats, "is Major Isabella Santos, the human you considered a primitive commander of a backwater colony." The display showed battle after battle. New Eden, Orion's belt, Earth, each defeat more devastating than the last. What none of us understood, I continued, was that Santos wasn't just defending colonies. She was studying us. Every engagement was a test, every battle an experiment. She learned our weaknesses, our patterns, our limits. The tactical displays told the story. How Santos had intentionally lost certain battles to test our responses. How she'd fed us false intelligence, making us believe we understood human capabilities. Every victory we'd celebrated had been carefully orchestrated. The humans knew they couldn't match our technology directly, I explained. So they turned our own hubris into a weapon. While we laughed at their primitive ships, they were redesigning them specifically to counter our tactics. While we mocked their projectile weapons, they were developing ways to bypass our shields entirely. Chancellor Rix, her bioluminescence dim with shame, spoke up. "But surely we had some effect. Our fleets were exactly where Major Santos wanted them," I interrupted. "Every time we thought we had them cornered, Every time we believed we were winning, we were playing directly into their hands. The final display showed the truth that broke the Council's pride. Communications logs, battle plans, tactical assessments all revealed that Santos had been feeding us precisely what we expected to see. We believed humans were predictable because she'd made us believe it. The cost of our pride, I concluded, wasn't measured in ships or territory. It was measured in our complete failure to understand our opponent. We were so convinced of our superiority that we never asked the most important question: what if they wanted us to underestimate them? High Speaker Valerian stood, his crystalline form catching the light. And now, what do your humans want? As if on cue, every display in the chamber activated simultaneously. Major Santos's face appeared on each one, a demonstration of human control over our most secure systems. What we've always wanted, she said calmly. Peace. But peace between equals, not between masters and servants. You called us primitives. You mocked our technology. You dismissed our capabilities. That ends now. The council chamber fell silent as the true cost of their arrogance sank in. Humanity hadn't just defeated our military, they'd shattered our entire worldview. Every assumption about technological superiority, about the natural order of species, had been turned against us. I looked around the chamber at the subdued faces of the council members. They'd finally learned what I'd tried to tell them from the start. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their ships, their guns, or even their tactics. It was their ability to make you underestimate them right up until the moment they proved you catastrophically wrong. The peace treaty signing ceremony took place on neutral ground, a space station orbiting Jupiter. As I watched the council representatives shuffle in, their usual grandeur replaced by cautious humility, I couldn't help but appreciate the symbolism. Humanity had chosen the largest planet in their system as the backdrop for this historic moment. A subtle reminder of their ability to think big. Major Santos arrived without ceremony or fanfare. She wore a simple dress uniform, no medals or decorations. She didn't need them. Her name alone now carried more weight than any symbol of authority the council could muster. The terms are simple, she stated, sliding a data crystal across the table. Recognition of human sovereignty. Non-interference in human affairs. Technology exchange programs, voluntary ones, not mandatory ones. And most importantly, a seat on the council. High Speaker Valerian examined the crystal. These terms are surprisingly generous. We're not interested in revenge or dominion, Santos replied. Despite what you might think, humans don't actually enjoy war. We're just very, very good at it when forced. That was the final lesson humanity taught us. Victory wasn't their goal, peace was. Every battle, every strategy, every deception had been aimed at bringing us to this table as equals, not as conquered subjects. The treaty was signed without further discussion. The council had learned that arguing with humans rarely ended well. As the ceremony concluded, I approached Santos privately. There's one thing I still don't understand, I admitted. Why show your hand now? You could have pressed your advantage, demanded more. Santos smiled, an expression I'd learned could mean many things when it came to humans. Because the war was never about proving our strength, she said. It was about proving we deserved respect. Besides, if you think you've seen the full extent of our capabilities, you weren't paying attention. That's when I understood the final, masterful layer of human strategy. Everything they'd shown us, the technological adaptations, the psychological warfare, the tactical brilliance, was just the surface. They'd revealed enough to earn their place without showing their full hand. As I watch humanity take their seat on the council today, I often think back to that first meeting when we laughed at them. We thought we were looking down at primitives. In reality, we were looking up at giants who were willing to kneel to give us a chance at peace. The council doesn't laugh anymore. We listen, we learn. And sometimes, late in our deliberations, I catch Major Santos smiling that mysterious smile, and I wonder what other surprises humanity is keeping in reserve. After all, they taught us the most important lesson in galactic politics: true strength lies not in showing your power, but in knowing when not to use it. The council learned to stop laughing. And humanity, they taught us how to grow up.